A comprehensive report.
You had a comprehensive report. So that was for a 2-week period.
For a 2-week period, yeah.
And what typically was in those reports?
In the reports, there were like their behaviors, their strengths, their weaknesses. Then there was in a synopsis of their abilities, of their skills.
Did you have that in the
strengths,
front?
Of their interests, yes.
You brought that up to the front page.
That front page, yes.
So you had kind of a synopsis up front.
Right.
And then did you have information about the different tests?
Then had information about different tests, about each individual test, and then about groups of tests.
Okay.
So, for instance, if the student had done very well in mechanical abilities, then you would just concentrate on that. Actually, not only on that, but I had subdivisions like mechanical, clerical, and so on. And in each area, I would describe what work samples, what tests I gave to
evaluate those areas.
Those areas, and why, and how those related to the synopsis, to the abilities, and so on. Then I would have recommendations. What sort of programs I would have. Also had a section in the report about learning.
What about learning? Like their learning styles?
Learning styles, yes. So I would tie all those together in my recommendations and talk about programs and also about how they would thrive in those programs. And also, if the student had physical disabilities, there would be a section in their report about that also.
What do you mean, a section in the report about that?
About the accommodations that I had made for...
Recommendations for?
Recommendations for it, yeah.
What source did you typically use when you were thinking about accommodations? Was there a resource you found helpful in finding resources to recommend?
Yes, there were many resources, but I can't think of them.
Did you ever use Job Accommodation Network?
Job Accommodation Network, yeah.
And I know your county had a robust assistive technology service, so that was probably...
That too, yes. It was actually an ongoing process. And I often, another thing that I did is in my work with adults, I worked with a lot of, vocational rehabilitation, social security, and I was always in contact with the referral source to see what their thoughts were, what was out there for the client. I also worked a lot with psychologists, with...
Did you find you were doing a lot of that near the end of your assessment when you were starting to get a picture of...
Yes.
So you were conferring with
right.
all these folks in the community and on
right.
at the professional level
right.
to help feed more information for you.
Yes, and I did that in the school with their referral sources too. I go towards the end of the assessment before I finalized my report. I got their input. Well, as I wrote my, as I did the evaluation, I had forms to record my observations that had categories.
Okay.
I also had forms that came with the work samples, and in the work samples I could synthesize the information and record. And as I was doing my evaluation, I was also doing the report actually, because I would formulate questions. I would look at what work groups they were they excelled at. So I would, it was a continuing sort of recording, synthesizing, making hypotheses as to what narrowing the scope of the evaluation according to their skills and
looking
their
for that,
weaknesses.
looking for that best outcome.
Best outcome. So it was now that I sat down to write a report and I looked at all these notes. They were organized. So the final writing a report was just putting it together as I was making hypotheses, answering the hypothesis, and narrowing the scope of the assessment. Because there's a wealth of work samples of tests. So you start with a very broad sort of range, and as you work through the evaluation, you narrow the scope, or extend it if there's a specific area that you see that there are skills.
When you were working as an evaluator in both the settings you talked about, do you have any kind of follow-up system in place that you were able to find out whether your evaluations were working and the recommendations from them?
Yes, as I said, I was in contact with the referral sources with adults.
After you finished?
After I finished. And I frequently knew what had happened to them. In the school system, it was a matter of it was up to me to find out, to follow up, and through contact with the
referral
sources. There was no system that reported back to me.
Which I think is unfortunately
yes.
a piece of the pie we need.
Yes.
Yeah. So you didn't have a way to keep an electronic file on someone and every year follow up with them, for example, which would make it probably very difficult because of the individuals sometimes.
Well, I think it's an essential service for people with disabilities, or for anyone. It's just that it varies. It is different. We also in Fairfax County did another type of assessment, which was a paper and pencil, and this was for students in GED programs that did not have disabilities.
How'd that go?
Oh, that was wonderful. To find out their interests and abilities. That was great. That was a very interesting program.
Did you find a lot of success in what you offered?
A lot of success in terms of student satisfaction. Again, I didn't know what happened to them afterwards, but yes, and insight, the insight that they gained into their career choices
through
that, yeah.
So they left usually in a very positive
situation.
situation.
Yes, situation.